Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch every single live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Welcome along to the football show on this Thursday evening. John Giles is going to be along with us just after 9:30 to take a look back at all the Champions League action from this week and to look ahead to this weekend's games in the Premier League. We're now having a look at the Ireland squad, which has been named for the next two internationals, a friendly against Latvia next Wednesday at the Aviva Stadium before they kick off their qualifying campaign for Euro 2024 against France on Monday week. France will play against Holland on Friday the 24th of March before they come to the Aviva Stadium to play against Ireland. Delighted to say that Gavin Cooney from the 42.ie is with us. Gavin, how are you getting on?
How are you, Will?
I'm looking at this squad and I'm thinking probably not a huge amount of surprises. We can maybe talk about Ryan Manning and a couple of others who haven't made it in. But to start with, Mikey Johnson straight in. No surprise, I think, because of the way that Stephen Kenny has spoken about him. I remember when Mikey Johnson was coming through under Brendan Rodgers initially at Celtic, the feeling was he was going to be a very hot winger for Celtic. He then had a couple of years of injuries in 2020 and 2021, which kind of set him back a little bit. And since then, Ange Postecoglou has spoken about him going to Portugal as an opportunity to further his career at Celtic as opposed to just his career generally. Stephen Kenny's spoken very positively about him as well. Is this an exciting new winger coming into the Ireland squad, or what do you make of him?
Yeah, I think that would definitely be the thinking of the coaching staff, wouldn't it? Yeah, it's a very familiar looking Irish squad. That's to be expected. I think the Stephen Kenny and his staff have done pretty well to build up a squad of players and find depth in various positions over the last couple of years. So they were never going to deviate too far away from the players that they know and they've seen thus far. For this fairly daunting Euro 2024 campaign. But the only fresh face in there is Mikey Johnston, and as to be expected, given that Stephen Kenny was eager to get him on board, Johnston's international clearance came through within the last couple of weeks. So when he comes, as regards like what kind of instant impact he'll make, I wouldn't be expecting one. He'll probably get a run out against Latvia. Wouldn't be shocked from not even to make the bench against France, because Stephen Kenny is traditionally not throwing new call-ups right into the fray. Like Will Smallbone didn't play at all when he came in last November. I remember Conor Ronan has been in and around squads and not made it onto the pitch. And Stephen Kenny did say that at his press conference today, that this will be an introduction to him, for him to the squad, but maybe don't expect too much too quickly from him. But look, Stephen Kenny has talked about him being the kind of profile of player that Ireland lack a little bit, certainly in terms of pacey wingers. Ireland probably don't have too many of those types of players. He's probably best in a 4-3-3, cutting off the left onto his right foot. Unfortunately, Ireland don't play that way, so he'll probably, he won't play up front, but he might play in behind the striker as one of those two number 10s when Ireland do play a slightly more attacking style, which in fairness we probably won't see against France.
Yeah, and Callum Robinson isn't around for this window, so potentially there might be an option there, particularly for the Latvia game. Before we talk about the rest of the squad, the way that this comprises, Gav, with the Latvia game and then France afterwards, Keith Tracy was making the argument earlier that Stephen Kenny, as opposed to being experimental in the Latvia game, might be keen, given how long it is since this team have played together, to actually play a reasonable strength Ireland team to start against Latvia and maybe introduce players like Will Smallbone and others to give him a chance later in the game. But maybe he might see the Latvia game as an opportunity to actually build connections, to build those partnerships ahead of the France game the week after.
Possibly. I don't know how keen they were really in playing this game, to be honest. I think obviously these friendlies are contractually obliged now at this point because everything is sold centrally through UEFA. So if you could offer them just a full clear week in the training ground rather than this, I'm not entirely convinced that they wouldn't say no to that. But this friendly will serve a purpose in terms of firstly getting minutes into the legs of a few first teamers, like Matt Doherty being the obvious one. Has played all of 16 minutes off the bench for Atletico since he joined them at the end of January. So he'll presumably play to get himself somewhat sharp for the game against the French. You'd imagine Nathan Collins will be in a similar position. They're using the Latvia game to start Evan Ferguson and build up a little bit of rapport and cohesion in attacking point of view. Is a pretty convincing argument. They'll also obviously be doing that and be working hard behind the scenes of training throughout the full week. Like they have, this Latvia game aside, Ireland are in the relatively fortunate position of having a really good lead-in. Like they're going to join. Well, the camp will begin effectively this Sunday night, and the game against the French isn't until Monday week. So that's, compared to some of the windows that Stephen Kenny has had to work in, that's lots and lots of time. It's almost an unimaginable amount of time together compared to what they're used to. But I wouldn't be expecting them to go very full strength against Latvia, to be quite honest with you. I think the first team players who have played lots of games in recent weeks won't play in that game. So I'd be surprised if you see Josh Cullen. I'd be surprised if you see John Egan. Maybe, I don't know, will he want to rotate the goalkeepers? But then it will be used for the likes of, Doherty and Collins and these guys who will probably start against France just to get them some minutes into their legs.
Yeah. Stephen Kenny, he's not holding back on Evan Ferguson. That was very clear from his comments earlier today, that I don't think there's any case that he's going to dip in very slowly with minutes, and maybe Adam Ida might start ahead of him. Or it sounds to me, Gavin, as if he has no problem actually throwing Evan Ferguson up front. And why wouldn't he with the form that he's shown from Brighton this year?
Well, the unfortunate thing for Adam Ida is he's probably going to be ruled out with injury. He went off for Norwich last night and left the ground on crutches. He asked not to be ruled out of the squad because he's gone for a scan. But, things seem unfortunately pessimistic on whether Ida will be fit to join the squad, which is so disappointing for him, having missed all of last year through injury. On Ferguson, the expectation is generally that he'll start against France. I don't think anyone would be surprised at that. It is to Kenny's great credit that they brought Ferguson into the squad in November ahead of schedule. I don't think that there were many people up in arms before that squad in November was announced calling for Ferguson to be included, but they brought him in because at the time they said, look, Ferguson could go out on loan in January, be playing regularly, and thus would be in contention for this window. So we wanted to get a look at him. Now, he's not gone on loan, but he's still playing regularly at Premier League level. Like, how many strikers do we have doing that? The answer is one, and that's Evan Ferguson. So my anticipation would be that he will play. Kenny wasn't, when Kenny was asked was the temptation to start him, he was coy on it, and he did praise the other strikers around Ferguson, like Parrott and Ogbene and Obafemi and these guys. But it's a very compelling argument now to start Ferguson against France on reputation, obviously, but on form, you'd have to say that he would be the natural pick.
Yeah, I think the argument being made about 21s players being accelerated and advanced, thinking back to those friendly international, particularly the Norway game, Will Smallbone came up continually during it because he had played so well in the 21s campaign, back in the senior squad this time round, playing for Stoke. He'll be hoping that he gets an opportunity to catch the eye, I would think, against Latvia. Yeah,
you'd imagine that he will get his chance. I was slightly surprised that we didn't even see him against Malta in November, but I think there has been a policy under this management team, really, of not making it not just handing out caps for the sake of it. Like Stephen Kenny has mentioned on numerous times that, to play for your country has to be the most important thing. So from a selection point of view, you should make that difficult. You should have to achieve things. But Smallbone, has showed no signs of being disappointed by not getting onto the pitch in November, has been playing very well for Stoke in recent weeks. A hat-trick of assists against Sunderland is probably his headline act. And obviously now he's working at Stoke with John O'Shea, who's obviously now on Stephen Kenny's senior coaching staff with Ireland as well. So, you'd imagine we might see him against Latvia into midfield. And look, he's included at the expense of Conor Houraghan, who's a relative stalwart of that Ireland squad, has been generally included for years under 3 straight managers when he's been available. So this is the first time in a very long time that he's been omitted.
Yeah, omitted at a time when he's fit and playing as well. Conor Houraghan was on with us on the show a couple of months ago, and he was talking about the fact that he was relishing the regular game time he was getting at Derby. He was starting to contribute some decent numbers again, and he was very hopeful it wasn't the end of the road for his Republic of Ireland career. In this case, it would feel as if Stephen Kenny is moving towards different midfield options. Not to say that Houraghan can't get back in the future, but him being left out here seems quite a move in the road of Conor Houraghan's international career.
Yeah, look, I mean, he obviously had that bad mistake when he came on against Armenia in that Nations League game in Dublin back in, was it September or October time? And look, he's playing regularly, but playing at League One, obviously Jason Knight is doing the same and in the same team, and he's in this squad. But generally, the rest of the midfielders are playing regularly and at a slightly higher level. That higher level is the Championship. Okay, it's not the Champions League, but it is slightly higher. I don't think anyone, certainly it's not the end of Hourahan's international career or anything like that. And I do think he's on standby for this squad. So, you know, one injury and he could be in. But yeah, omitted for this squad, obviously, with Smallbone taking the chance to impress over the last couple of months.
The other midfield options, we don't see Robbie Brady involved. We can probably talk about Ryan Manning in a bit more detail when we talk about the defenders, but you can see that Mark Sykes has got in. Jimmy McGrath, I'm guessing, has been preferred probably to Hourahan as part of this squad with the composition of the midfield too. And Sam Stamoulis seemed he was going to be picked because his international clearance had come through, and the FAI had made a point of pointing out that his international clearance had come through, and then a week later he's not in the squad.
Yeah, again, I did expect to see his name in there, Smodix. He has been playing pretty well for Blackburn side that are going well in the Championship, and has been playing in a almost central number 10 role, really. But, you know, Smallbone and McGrath are evidently just slightly ahead of him at the moment. McGrath, obviously, McGrath knows how, I don't know, I guess the word is fickle, how fickle this sport can be, because McGrath was brought in at the end of 2021 and really impressed. You know, I think he obviously started away to Portugal, if I'm remembering correctly.
Played over on the right hand side and played really well that night, I thought.
Yeah, and just kind of obviously diligent off the ball, but also quite tactically aware and quite tactically smart, knowing to drop in when he needed to, and then won Ireland's first penalty for about 14 years at home to Qatar. But then found himself out of the squad as soon as he stopped playing at my memory is going to let me down now. He went to
Wigan, didn't he? When it looked like he was going to go elsewhere, and then it didn't work for him. Now he's back at Dundee United again.
Yeah, so he's back in Scotland playing regularly, and those back in the squad. So yeah, he's in, and obviously Smodix hasn't made it. Smodix was in a squad ages ago in the summer of, was it 2021, for friendly internationals, but as it turned out, long delay on getting his passport or getting his paperwork in order to satisfy FIFA. It is ready now, but he hasn't made the cut. But these are all, you know, like, it's not exactly really high stakes stuff, these squad announcements. You know, there are some players who miss out. They notably miss out because Kenny doesn't do what Martin O'Neill does and name these enormous, 38, 40 man squads or preliminary squads before then cutting it down.
Yeah, it is a slightly smaller core group then. I think we saw like 40-man squads at times, and then next thing, 4 of them have been ruled out before the next squad is named, before the game actually takes place. So, I mean, one of the takeaways I'd have here, Colin O'Dowd has been put down as a defender, so obviously he's been seen as a wing-back by Kenny as part of the system. But on the left-hand side, it looks like James McLean is in real pole position now to start against France when that game comes round on Monday week. But no Ryan Manning, despite the fact he's playing regularly at the moment and playing reasonably well.
Ryan Manning does seem to be the co-celeb of the angry Irish football fan online this afternoon. Look, it seems Stephen Kenny says it's a pretty marginal decision. He was asked about Ryan Manning. I think it was the second question at the press conference earlier today, sorry. And he just said that Callum O'Dowd is slightly ahead of him. So O'Dowd, Robbie Brady has missed out as well in the squad. O'Dowd and Manning, Brady are all similar in the sense that they were all attacking players who have now been retooled as left-sided defensive players, and Callum O'Dowd has been playing, well, occasionally left wing-back, but generally left-back in a back four for Cardiff City in the Championship this year. And Stephen Kenny showered him with praise earlier today, saying that he was Cardiff's Player of the Year and thus far. So he's always been a fan of O'Dowd and what he can bring. Initially that was as a right-sided attacker cutting in, so that would have fit. That might fit a 4-3-3, but now Ireland have obviously changed how they play with a back three and so forth, and it's O'Dowd and McLean as the prime candidates to start at left wing back against the French. I guess Matt Doherty could played their away to Portugal back in 2021, but I'd say O'Dowd is probably the first pick there at the moment.
Yeah, Matt Doherty's been a big favourite of Stephen Kenny's along the way, and he has played various different roles for Stephen Kenny over the last couple of years. His lack of game time at Atletico has to be a concern, though, because he'd lost his place at Spurs just before the end of the January window. He's had incredibly limited time since he went to Spain. Understandably, when Argentina's World Cup winning right back is ahead of you at club level, he's probably going to be on the bench for most of the season. And Atletico's good run of form has coincided with Doherty coming to the team but not being part of the team. Does Kenny get worried that this guy's played very little football in the calendar year?
Yeah, I think it is a concern. It absolutely is. And, he's obviously got Nahuel Molina ahead of him at right back at Atletico, but when Molina was suspended for a recent league game against Sevilla. Rather than throw Doherty straight into the team, Simeone picked a back three and played Marcus Llorente at right wing back. So Doherty came off the bench and played 16 minutes in a 6-1 win, and they're the only minutes he's played for Atletico so far. So it's now looking inevitable that he will start against Latvia, and that'll be his first start since, I think, the North London Derby, if I'm right, way back in the middle of January. So that is a huge concern, because Doherty is a very important player for Ireland. And the right wing back position is of particular significance against France, because it's down that flank that they're most dangerous offensively, with Mbappe and probably Theo Hernandez. But then they're actually most vulnerable down that flank defensively as well. We saw, remember, particularly Morocco exploited that really well in the second half of the World Cup semi-final, because Mbappe is an incredible attacker, but he just simply does not defend. And Theo Hernandez is a lot less defensively sound than his brother Lucas, who's obviously out injured for this tie. And their only other option at left back is Eduardo Camavinga, who's we saw how good he was in midfield for Real Madrid last night, but he'll be a left back for France. So you could say from an Irish point of view that right wing back role is going to be so important in this game. Doherty is the perfect player for it. But very frustratingly, he's going to come in not particularly match fit. So I'd still be surprised if he didn't start there, because there's not a massive amount of options otherwise, Coleman or maybe Alan Brown. But in an ideal world, Doherty would be coming into this having played at least 90 minutes since his last set in mid-January.
I think that's an important point to make about France's left side, because Camavinga played at left back for Real Madrid at the weekend, and he got cut out of position for Espanyol's goal. Like, he's a very good footballer, but naturally his position is a bit further forward in midfield. And if Ireland are going to pose a threat against France on Monday week, it's going to be on the counter attack. And sometimes, I think back to the Portugal game this year, where you talked about Jamie McGrath and Seamus Coleman, where Ireland were actually quite good down that side, where spaces were being left, and they would hope that if Mbappe is playing up really high, that's an area where they can hurt them. And to me, that seems like if you had a in form and playing regularly Matt Doherty, that's exactly what he'd love to be doing, is running up there and terrorising at the other end.
Yeah, and he can cause such damage coming in off that wing. So and that space is open there for France, because they ask Adrien Rabiot to cover it, and he generally does okay at that role. But that is an area in which Ireland can attack France. So that Doherty isn't going to be fully sharp is a massive disappointment for them, unfortunately. Now, look, they had, if you remember, Aaron Connolly started that game in Portugal way back in 2021, because he was kind of the only attacker Ireland had at that stage that had serious pace to exploit those gaps. And in fairness to Kenny, he's built up a lot of depth now in those forward positions, and he was talking about this today, that the different profiles of players that they've got. So the likes of Obafemi and especially Chidozie Ogbene now can be picked from the start to exploit that space with their pace on the counter-attack. So it's not as if Ireland won't have options to exploit that space, but obviously Matt Doherty is their best right wing back. It's going to be an important role, and they'd in an ideal world, which God knows Ireland certainly don't exist in, he would be fully match sharp and ready to go.
And he might like to have Ogbene's pace to be available there when he's tracking back during the game too. If he's there, he's a guy who can go back and Kylian Mbappe a little bit and actually offer a bit of support whoever is at right wing back as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, the strange thing about Ogbene is he's played right wing back quite regularly for Rotherham, or certainly did last season. And I know the Irish management team always expressed slight bafflement to that. They always saw him as an attacker, but it gives him a certain defensive awareness if he is asked to plug into that role, even occasionally out of possession. So that's why I kind of think that Ogbene will end up starting against France, although we're a little bit away from that yet. I usually get my team predictions wrong a lot closer to kickoff, Will, with you guys, rather than go for it now. Maybe I should go. Maybe I should always go earlier, and then maybe it's more likely it'll be forgotten.
Well, yeah, you can go early. It won't be clipped up. It won't be remembered by the time the game comes round, and you can easily turn and say, "Hey, look, we were talking a couple of weeks ago. Then Adam Ida was ruled out, and then there was all these changes that had to be made." Generally, I always wait when you're talking about squads for the best part until at least the Sunday, maybe the Monday morning after the last round of games, because these squads are always named. The next thing, 4 or 5 players have to cry out after the weekend that's just upcoming. So the squad might look very different come Monday as opposed to what's named today. Our football coverage is with thanks to Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sport. Gav, they did name the France squad today as well, and there's a real kind of feeling of change here. Ousmane Dembele, once we saw him last night watching Sunderland against Sheffield United, it was pretty clear he wasn't going to be back for next week. He's resting currently. But with the retirements like Karim Benzema and Hugo Lloris and some of the players they have out injured at the moment like Paul Pogba and the aforementioned Dembele, there's quite a different feel to this France squad even compared to the one that went to the World Cup.
Slightly, yeah. Not massively in the sense that Olivier Giroud is still there. I have to say, I thought Giroud was finished at the World Cup, but he's still there. And Deschamps was explaining that he's still there because he's still playing at a high level. And his clubmate Zlatan Ibrahimovic has been brought back for Sweden, and he's 5 years older than him. So naturally, Giroud is still there. But there are some new players. Definitely, the centre back partnership will be new. Varane has retired, and Kimpembe is injured. So now they're not stuck for options there. Pick 2 from Konate, Upamecano, Fofana, and Jules Koundé.
Koundé and Saliba as well.
So you've also got William Saliba. William Saliba recently seen being torched by Evan Ferguson.
Yeah, bullied that night.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves here, obviously. And then obviously they'll retool Camavinga as an option at left back. And they've also brought in another Lilian Thuram's sons, Kefren from Nice. So Marcus is obviously there as well. And then, 24-year-old Kylian Mbappe. Well, Mbappe's still only 24, so he's in the squad. He may end up being the captain. They haven't appointed one since the retirement of Hugo Lloris. And I don't France have obviously lost players. It's hard to make much of an argument to say that they're weaker in any of the positions in which they've lost players, because Mike Maignan of AC Milan is probably an upgrade on Hugo Lloris, I have to say. Lloris was obviously captain and brought a lot to that dressing room in terms of leadership and just basic common sense. But they still have some, like the options up front. They've got Kingsley Coman. We saw how good he was for Bayern against PSG across the last couple of weeks. Griezmann has become one of the great midfielders of international football, and he's listed as a forward. Colin Mawani and Marcus Thuram, we saw them make impacts at the World Cup, and they're up near the top of the Bundesliga scoring chart. So there is a bit of slightly refreshed look about the squad for France, but still very, very strong. The only places they might be slightly weaker at fullback, like Koundé. He's never, Pavard might play. Deschamps has never fully trusted him, I don't think. Koundé will probably play right back. We saw Di Maria take him to the cleaners in the World Cup final. And then at left back, it's Theo Hernandez, who's great going forward and not great going backwards. Or else it's obviously Camavinga.
Yeah, Mikey Johnson, step into the team, play like Angel Di Maria and give Koundé problems at right back. The only thing about Koundé being an auxiliary right back at the moment, Gav, is the fact that he's playing for Barcelona an awful lot there. That was never their plan, was for him actually to play centre back as opposed to right back. But even taking that World Cup final out of the account, Koundé for the best part actually looks really comfortable at right back now for a guy who played the vast majority of his football at centre back at Sevilla.
Yeah, but I was clinging to something, Will, and that's that gone. I have to say, because everyone looked at the weaknesses down France's left-hand side behind Mbappe at the World Cup and thought that's the area to exploit. And the brilliant move that Scaloni, the Argentinian manager, made was to swap Di Maria from the right to the left and pull him wide and just get Koundé into areas in which he's not massively comfortable in, because he's a centre back. His natural inclination is always to drift in. So if Ireland can take Koundé out and just kind of pull him wide and get him into positions that he's not 100% comfortable in, there might be some joy there for them. But it's, given Ireland's relative paucity of options down that left flank and just the way they play with the wing backs and so forth, that might be difficult to do. They obviously don't have a player of Di Maria's quality.
And I guess the way Ireland are going to be approaching this, a couple of weeks to go till the game, will probably be to try and dig in and be difficult to play against. In many ways, the blueprint is there. If we think of the Belgium games recently, Portugal recently, both home and away, that's exactly the type of performance I would think Stephen Kenny is looking for. It's probably fanciful to think that they're going to win, but they would want to put in a performance like those two teams particularly.
I think so, yeah. But it's not... Ireland will try... There'll be a very coherent counter-attacking strategy, I would imagine. There was a great line that Kenny had. I can't remember. Maybe it was before the Belgium game. There's no point sitting in and sitting deep because it's a slow death. And France, like France are particularly good at beating sides who just want to sit deep, because look at the size of them. You know, they've got so many big guys that they're really dangerous from set pieces. Like Giroud is still there. The centre backs are enormous. Rabiot in midfield is a real danger on set pieces, and Griezmann's delivery is absolutely outrageously good. So Ireland will probably need to pick some physicality to match them in that regard. So there's no point in sitting in your 18-yard box and then just booting the ball clear. Ireland will have less possession. They will have to play in the counter-attack. If Ferguson is good to go, he gives them an outlet up front just to hold the ball up that they've missed last year during Ida's injury absence. But we've seen how, you know, the template for the counter-attacking strategy and to exploit space behind fullbacks and so forth was Portugal away. They obviously lost that game thanks to Ronaldo's late goals. But obviously, you know, they can learn a lot from that. And ironically, Stephen Kenny said subsequently to that game that maybe they dropped too deep too early in that second half. So they won't sit deep on their 18-yard box. That's not how they're going to play. They'll probably mid-block maybe and play in the counter-attack. But it's not going to be 90 minutes of clinging on for your dear life, because there's no point in doing that because France are too good.
Gavin Cooney at the 42.8, thanks for joining us on the Football Show. Our football coverage is with thanks to Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sport ahead of this weekend. We're going to take a short break. We'll be talking to John Giles when we come back.